Hello, hello. I'm Kelly Francis. I'm the admin of EE Rock from Facebook, where expat entertainers are okay. If you're from my group, I hope you submitted your question or your interest to our poll, and if you didn't, there's still time. If you're not from my group, you're seriously missing out. Don't go anywhere because you can learn something very cool about the people that work in entertainment in Seoul, South Korea. Let's do it!
If you've ever wondered how voice acting works in South Korea, stick around. Barri Tsavaris, a veteran voice actor of over 10 years, breaks it down for us in a way that you definitely can't find on Google. Born in New York City, she got her degree in film at Boston University. And after a stretch of teaching and performing improv and sketch comedy at Gotham City Improv, Barri found herself voice acting, and doing a little in between in Seoul, South Korea.
At the first goal is still ringing in my ear. I seem to shout in my mind throughout the entire game, "We are one."
Ah! Hey, that's too scary from the start. This is not a horror show, you know.
Okay, so we're here with Barri, and we're going to learn how to get started with voice acting in Korea, which was the #1 requested topic in my group.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for watching. I've been in Korea for 11 or so years, and I've been a professional actor here for about 10 of those. From New York originally, and I have a theater background. Sort of theater just runs through my veins. But I came to Korea in 2011. And I've been working here predominantly as a voice actor and occasionally on-camera actor ever since.
Now that is what I call a shopping trip. Such amazing deals. Oh, it is getting late. All this time, nothing ever made him go outside. It was such a great step.
Did you come to Seoul with the intention of being an actor, or did it happen accidentally? How did it happen?
I came to Korea, I had been working in New York City, and after the 2008-2009 housing crisis in America, I lost my day job, spent a year unemployed in New York City, which I don't recommend. And then I think it was September of that year, I was sitting in my office, which was the New York City Public Library. Sitting in my office, I was unemployed, homeless, had blown through my savings. Yeah. I went through some things.
It's the actor's lifestyle.
Homeless, I meant like I wasn't living on the streets, but I was living with friends and family.
Starving artist.
Yeah. And then.
And you're heavily involved with theater in Seoul.
Yes. I used to be the artistic director of Seoul Players. I've been very involved with Seoul Shakespeare Company. Probationary Theater is a group that used to be here that I used to perform with a lot. And so I just remember thinking, like, I just closed this play, and what's next? I thought, you know what? I'm getting a lot of signs telling me, the universe is telling me, leave New York for a little bit. I started just Googling, what kind of job can I get with only a liberal arts degree in another country? Like, what country can I go to? And so all signs were coming up. You need to go teach English in Asia. It came down to Japan and Korea for me. And then honestly, it was just a numbers game.
But you did start off as an English teacher. That seems to kind of be a norm.
Yeah, my plan was to come for 1 year. And while I was here, my plan was to write the next Eat, Pray, Love for the stage. I was going to write my next play. And then I was going to swiftly go back to New York City. And then at the end of my first year in Korea, I was in a production of the Vagina Monologues. And one of my...
I remember rehearsals.
Yeah. Good times. Old Itaewon. And one of my castmates, who became a very good friend of mine, and I'm still in touch with her, I asked her, oh, so what are you, teacher or military? And she was like, neither. I'm a voice actor. And I was like, what? Tell me more about that.
Yeah.
I was like, what, for money?
Yeah.
And she was like,
People
yes,
pay us to talk.
for lots of money. And I was like, oh, Cool. And I was very fortunate that she, a lot of other people in this business become kind of like gatekeepers,
Right.
and don't want to give away information about how to get in, how to do it themselves. But I was really lucky that we hit it off. She became a good friend, and she was willing to help me. And she introduced me to her agent, who then became my agent.
Would you say
Um,
that it's difficult for new people to get involved? Like they
More recently, it's easier. I think that there are agencies on Instagram, and you can, most actors are now on visas and legal and posting about their work. So it's easier now because of the internet to see who everybody is working for. And you could just do a little bit of digging and kind of figure it out. But agencies don't have websites. They have a web hard where they
Yes,
have
web hard, which is
yeah.
something a lot of people from the West have never heard of.
Right. So WebHard, I guess, is kind of like Dropbox meets Squarespace, maybe. Like you can have your own page. So it's a little different from Dropbox. So it was hard to find information. And I didn't know, because I was so new 10 years ago.
Right.
I didn't know how hard it was and how lucky I was that this person just welcomed me in, gave me information, helped me out. And it wasn't until I was in it for a couple, even maybe just a year, that other people told me, we don't give information out. You are not to do that. I think it's more welcoming now than it was before. It's more open. There's more transparency.
Okay.
I do think that people are still very protective, especially of a good thing.
Well, that makes sense in terms of, any professional would obviously be protective over their clientele. What are the agencies, the main agencies, like it was?
So the main agency for English language or for foreign language recording is Elgate. And they were the agency that I started with and I was introduced to. So they do most of the casting. And then there's Toosix Media. And I would say they're the second largest, and they focus largely on what we call gyoje, which is educational recording,
Right.
With the occasional foray into animation and video games and narration work. But they're mostly educational recording, which is the bread and butter of our business here in Korea.
The bread and butter is educational.
Yes, it's the work that there's the most of it because of the ESL business in Korea. An example of gyoje would be reading textbook dialogues, a textbook like for a publishing company or for a hagwon that is an academy that is making their own materials. And then there's all of the English language exams and testing organizations.
Okay.
That's the lowest hourly rate.
Okay.
And
hourly, you mentioned hourly rate. So is voice acting generally paid by the hour then?
No, and I'm glad that you asked that. Educational recording is paid by the hour, but most other recording should be paid if it's commercial or corporate narration, which we call hangbo in Korea. Those are paid based on usage.
Right.
And animation is usually paid based per episode recorded.
What?
Okay, so we already talked about textbook recording.
Right.
Very similar genre. The next similar genre I would say would be e-learning, but e-learning is different because that is specifically meant for online use. So because of that, it's paid more. And it takes you have to be highly skilled to do e-learning. And a lot of the e-learning is corporate. So it'll be like internal, Samsung or LG is making internal HR programs for their employees. And then we have, again, the next one related over, I would call corporate narration.
Okay.
Corporate narration is what we call hangbo in Korea, which is like promo. Corporate narration is like when you see on YouTube, maybe like a 1 minute to 3 minute video that a company has, like a brand video. And it's not a commercial. An example of Hungbo would be, let's say Samsung is introducing a new product to the market, but they want to spend a little bit more than 15 or 30 seconds with it. And they're going to release it on their YouTube page. It's not going to be on television. It's going to be usually promo, Hongbo, corporate narration is strictly for the company website and their company YouTube page. Yeah, so we get paid on how these videos are used and how our audio is used. So if it's just being used one video internally, like on the company's own site, and that's all, we have a base pay rate that we get. But then let's say Samsung wants to put it on their YouTube page and they want it to be a sponsored video on their YouTube page. Well, suddenly that's reaching such a larger audience. So our rate then gets doubled, our pay rate.
How do people learn? Do people depend on agencies to understand what the appropriate rate is?
Well, in a perfect world.
Right.
Okay, so then we have animation. Animation can be YouTube videos like for Pororo or Pinkfong or
Pororo is a popular one.
Yeah, I've recently recorded some Pororo. Yeah,
Really?
So there's animation that is produced for YouTube, and then there's also like Korean television animated series that, let's say the Korean government, like Arirang, decides that they want to export a series, like 12, you're booked for like 12 episodes of that first season.
So that's a good gig then.
Yeah, that's a great gig.
When you mentioned dubbing, what is the difference between recording and then dubbing? What is the skill of dubbing?
Well, dubbing, I love dubbing, but it's really, really hard because the original animation was written for Korean language. So we have to not just learn our characters and act as our characters, but we have to match the lips as we're watching the video. And we don't memorize these scripts. Oftentimes we're only given the scripts maybe the night before.
What if the English doesn't match the Korean? What do you do?
Well then, if the English doesn't match the Korean, we're usually given some flexibility and control to adjust the script as we see fit. So sometimes the Korean's really long and the English is not, or vice versa. It's really hard. Like a very simple example of that would be like if the character says like "감사합니다" and like the script just says thanks.
Right.
So I have to fit bum dum with thanks. So then we'll change it to thank you very much.
So basically you have to, be on the ball to act, but you also have to adapt for the culture. So it's kind of, there's multiple skills involved in that. So that's dubbing.
Usually here in Seoul for English language, we're usually dubbing a product that is already created. Okay. So a difference between actors that do animation in America versus here is that a lot of times they get to originate, which means that they record their script and they're not matching lips. And then the animation is made based around their audio. I hear about that and I'm like, oh God, wouldn't that be nice? And we get to originate oftentimes with the next genre, which I'm going to talk about, which is video games. A lot of times
Seoul has a lot of big video game companies.
Yeah, lots of huge game companies, especially the past year and a half with COVID. A lot of game production has been amped up. Commercials.
TVCFs, I think they're called.
Yeah, TVCF, television commercial film. And everyone wants to do commercials. Well, so what the business is changing and the style that is requested is changing. But when I first started 10 years ago, the style of voice acting for commercials in Korea was more announcery. And so I would be doing these cosmetic commercials. I had a cosmetics.
Can you give us an example?
introducing the new whatever from Skin Food. Like, hey girl, don't you just want this thing on your face that's so great? Like, that would be
Announcery and polished, basically.
yeah, that wouldn't be the text, the copy, but that was the style. Very polished, very stylized. But the past 5 years, it has been shifting to the more natural American style of voice acting for commercials, which, and thank goodness. It's very challenging for these seasoned vets, or even myself, to be natural in a commercial recording. And I've been working with voiceover coaches in America, and I've paid like thousands of dollars to learn how to speak like a normal person again.
Do you know that my agent called it the disease that I came here with? It's hard because we're conditioned to be perfect, like pronunciation wise, and that's not normal.
It is the hardest thing, the greatest challenge of my career.
Give me an example of the most extreme version of what English might, like what's pretty in Korean ears.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Like, hi, nice to meet you. How are you? I'm fine, thank you. Like, very sing-songy, very clear. No, you don't hear, like, when we're just talking normal, you can hear a little bit of like vocal fry or like natural things. I think a lot of it comes from their idea of what English sounds like, but also because so much of the recording that we do in English in Korea is for educational purposes. They need it to be a little bit slower and a little bit clearer, and they like women's voices to be right in the middle. Like, voice actors and actresses, I think, that book the most in educational work are people that have a voice right in the middle. Men, if your voice is too low, they're not going to book.
Well, maybe
not for educational.
Okay, but what about other genres?
Oh yeah, so, well, my husband, for example, is also a voice actor, and he has a very deep, resonant voice, and he does a lot of video games. He's pretty much called in for like every kind of monster you can imagine.
Well, so would you say that any voice type is if I'm someone that wants to go into voice acting, any voice type has a place in some genre?
Absolutely. There is a place for every voice. And, I used to think that the quality of your voice mattered more than it really does. I used to think like, well, I'm successful in this career because of my voice, my gift. And that's a part of it. Having a nice voice is certainly a part of it, but it's called voice acting. Acting is so key to what we do. And the more I get involved in the American and European market with my own studio that's right behind me, the more I realize that it's not about creating a certain sound. It's about acting the scenario. And in Korea, we've been trained to create certain sounds and mimic.
Would you say that there's a preset idea, and your job is to emulate something that already exists in Korea?
Yeah, when I started, the agent that I was working with played the samples of the 2 or 3 top women at his agency, and he said, "You have to sound like this." And I said, "Okay, I can do that." But then there's stylistic things that we do when we're reading that I started to learn and mimic from the women that were working before me. And I know for certain that people that came in after me were given my voice to learn. So it's sort of this sound that has been passed down. It's changing a little bit as the trend becomes more toward the American natural style.
What other genres are there? Just so we get them all out.
I've covered
animation,
basics,
e-learning.
Yeah, then there's like smaller things like ARS or IVR. Those are ARS is a what automated response system.
Or sound, I've heard it called sound chips before. So basically,
Yeah,
what's that mean?
that's like when you call a business and they have an answering service on the phone. Um, Thank you for calling, whatever, whatever, whatever. Press one
Machines
for,
talking. Like
yeah,
I often describe it as machines talking. Would
yeah,
that be accurate?
I think so.
Rice
Yeah.
makers or cars, navigation systems, maybe.
Yeah, I'm the voice of lots of hotels in Korea.
Are you really?
I always tell my friends that if you bank with Woody, like don't let your balance go low, because then I'm gonna have to tell you like insufficient funds. And I don't want to tell
Woody,
you
the
that.
bank is a Korean bank. Yeah.
Yeah. Korean. So within the realm of educational content, there's educational content for different ages. Within children's education, there's straight up language education, like
Act,
textbooks, but then there's
the acting.
also like books that come with like an online or DVD component that has songs. So there's a lot of singing and chanting work for younger learners in Korea. And actually, there is a dearth of singers in Seoul. So it's a really hard business to get into voice acting in Korea. But if you're a singer and you can sing like a child, especially,
Yes.
there's
Exactly.
definitely a place for you, especially right now.
Sing like a child. So that means in the character voice, right? Like singing like a
Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Like, yes.
People don't hire children; they hire adult women, right?
They usually hire adult women to do kids' voices, little boy voices, and chanting is more. Gosh, I'm trying to think of a good chanting example. Like, I don't know. It'll be like a apple, and then the kids have to repeat it. So there's whole entire.
It sounds like it's to help them learn language, a
Yes,
tool to help them learn language. So it's very ESL specific.
exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
so
But there's
that
a lot of that,
yeah.
work, and oftentimes when you're booked by an agent, it's different when you book direct with the client or studio. You get more information. But oftentimes when you're booked by an agent, they just send you, the time and the location, the address of the studio, and you show up, and you know that maybe you're on an educational job, that much, but you don't know until you get there what you're going to do. And you're often working with Korean clients that don't speak English very well,
Right.
and they will write these chants to go with English words, but they don't realize they're putting the emphasis on the wrong syllables in the chant.
Yeah.
So the emphasis is on the wrong place. Like, it's just so part of your job is to
right.
not get pissy about it and be like, I can't work under these conditions. Part of your job is to think on your feet and help the client phrase the chant so that it fits the music.
You need to speak Korean to be an effective voice actor.
아니요.
That means no.
I mean,
yeah.
It certainly helps. I don't speak Korean as well as I wish I did. Maybe about 8 years ago, when my voice acting career was really beginning to take off, I realized I felt like this helpless, stupid child in studios because I couldn't speak Korean. So I hired a tutor to just help me learn how to say like 40 things in a studio.
You talked about voices. So would you say that for people that are going to be multifunctional voice actors, they should have an arsenal of voices, and what voices would they be?
Yeah, for sure. In our market in Korea, I mean, it's different for actors outside of Korea. So in our market, you, as a woman, you have to have a go-to girl's voice. And when I say
child girl, you mean child. Okay.
Child. So probably around 8 years old. But for me, because I've like fine-tuned over the years, I have like a baby, and I have like a toddler and a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old and then a 10-year-old. And then I have like preteen and teenager.
But generally a girl's voice.
Generally, if you just have a girl's voice.
Right.
girl's voice just sounds like this.
And then a boy voice. Women are asked to do the boy voices. Yeah. But the first time that first agent I worked with said, I went in for a meeting and to make some samples. And he said, okay, now do your boy voice. I didn't know what they were talking about. And I didn't even know how to make a sound. I didn't even know what.
How did you learn how? How do people learn how to do that?
I learned how. So they just started. Well, I did something creepy. I think I was like, I'm a boy. Like, it was so creepy and bad. But then they played something for me, another woman's sample, and they said, no, it should sound like this. And so I learned by mimicking.
Can you give us an example of a boy's voice?
Yeah, hi. My name is Eric, and I'm 8 years old, and I want to introduce you to my brother. Hi, I'm Steve, and I'm 10 years old. So yeah, it's
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, a boy's voice, a girl's voice, and a regular adult's voice. Anything else is important? Is
you
it
should
like a straight-
have two women's voices ready to go at all times.
that must be hard. I mean,
Um,
another woman's adult voice, that must be difficult.
it is, and sometimes I feel like sometimes we're asked to do more than two, and that's when they start to sound, in my mind, ridiculous. And then as you get a little bit more experienced, your agent will start to send you out on jobs that are a little more challenging, like storybook jobs, where you could have, in one storybook session, I could do 20 different
Wow.
voices. And then I'm
That
a
must be
witch.
fun though. I mean, to put a voice to character, that must be fun.
I love it. It can be hard sometimes to keep the tone consistent throughout a session, or to reach, as you start to get older, your voice changes. My voice has been changing.
What
as I get
age is it? That's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. With women particularly, it does tend to get thicker and lower. What age roughly does that tend to happen?
For me, like, it started to happen late 30s. You need to really focus on your health, your vocal health, because I have seen, especially with male voice actors, and a lot of the men here smoke, which I don't understand how you can do that. But they can do a kid's voice, like a 12-year-old boy, and now they're 45 years old and they smoke all the time, and maybe they had a big night out, and I'm on the job with them and they can't do this boy's voice anymore.
Women, do men have to do a little boy and a little girl too, or and it seems
Not a
like
girl.
mostly women?
Not a girl at all. But men are asked to do boys' voices. But
Imagine that I'm a new person that's
Mm.
coming in, and I'm interested in becoming a voice actor. Is that something that I should know how to do?
To be able to do a character voice
Yeah, like a boy and a girl voice and two adult voices.
in this market, yes.
course.
So one of the big differences between our market and Western markets is that we're expected as English language actors to do everything. In America, voice actors specialize more. So you'll have voice actors that pretty much just do e-learning, corporate narration, ARS, and commercials. Like, that's all they do. And then you have actors that are just animation. A lot of voice acting in America is done remotely, but games and animation are, I think that those genres are still going to be, as long as COVID allows, they'll still be in studio if people can do it.
So one cool thing about being in Korea is that you really can try everything.
Yeah. And I thought it was normal. First things first is you educate yourself about what kind of recording is done in Korea, English language, and
And you've helped us understand the different genres.
Yeah. And so, watching this is part of that.
Right.
And I would go make an appointment with the two main agencies, Elgate and Toosix Media. You make an appointment and you're going to go in, and it's going to be real laid back. They're going to give you copy to read. You don't have to worry about bringing your own copy. And they're going to ask
Copy
you to read
means script, right?
Yes, they're going to give you the scripts when you get there. Maybe. But basically what you're going to be reading just that first time is educational passage, like a paragraph that is going to be, that would be used for like TOEIC or TOEFL or
Or
IBT.
phonics.
Yeah. And oftentimes these paragraphs are like a weather report or a news report, or like a phone, like an answering message, like, "Hi, and welcome to Susie's Flowers. Like, we're offering a special," that like, it's going to be something like that. Then the other thing you're going to be given within education is a dialogue, and you'll read that with somebody that's working there at the agency. So that's education. Then you're going to be given a corporate narration or hungbo script, which would be something that we talked about it earlier, a company would put to a video on YouTube, say. And you have to think about the sell. What are they selling? What are they promoting? And that's going to be generally what you're given the first time you go in. They will also ask you, can you do any characters? Can you do kids' voices? And that'll be your opportunity to maybe do educational with a boy and a girl voice. Or if you do any great, sometimes we get asked for impression recordings. So if there's anything that you do vocally that's really good, like maybe you can do, Gandalf and different like superhero and like characters like that. If you're a singer, they're going to want you to sing two different things. They're going to want you to sing something educational for children, like a nursery rhyme.
Row your boat, maybe.
Yeah, don't stress about this. It's just going to be Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or Mary Had a Little Lamb. They're going to ask you to do it in your adult voice, and they'll ask you to do it, if possible, as a child. That's pretty much going to be
The beginning.
your first day going in to make a demo with them, and you'll be in and out in 30 minutes.
So that's the beginning. That's
the beginning.
Just so we know, in terms of your lifestyle, how often do you work?
Well, COVID has sort of changed that a little bit, but typically I work every single day, like Monday through Friday. I work every day. My schedule changes constantly from day to day. So some days I only have to go to one studio and that's it, and I'm done. Or maybe I don't even have anything.
But every job is generally at a different studio, right?
Yes, and there are hundreds of studios in Seoul. And so while I do believe that it's very important that you, as soon as possible, have an understanding of the tech behind all of this and what kind of things you should be listening for and equipment and things like that, to start in Seoul, you don't need that. If you were in America, you absolutely need to have, what I have behind me is your own booth and a microphone and an interface, and there's all these things.
But not in Korea.
Not in Korea. That said, having those things in Korea, will it help you? Yes. Oftentimes we're asked to do auditions for jobs. I audition, even though I've been 10 or 11 years in this, I still audition. Usually when I'm auditioning, it's for video game, animation, or commercial.
So we talked about going in and auditioning for an agency for representation. What is the equivalent of a voice actor's resume? What do people, like in America, they tend to have demos. What do we do in Seoul?
Yeah, so in America, you cannot get your business off the ground unless you have a professionally produced demo, ideally coaching before that, and a website. In Seoul, you can go to one of those agencies, record samples there, and then just based off of the samples, you can be sent out on jobs. I would say there's more agencies now than when I started, and on-camera agencies are also getting involved in voiceover booking, and clients are getting younger, they're better at English, they like engaging with the talent directly. So for all these reasons, you really need to be your own entrepreneur. What I will just, I guess, last bit of advice is though you can build a full career with agents in Korea, and that is where you have to start here in this market. I strongly encourage people to be their own advocates and do everything that you can to build your own business.
Yes.
Maintain good relationships with clients and studios. As soon as you're able to start to learn about how to do it at home. I consider myself an entrepreneur and a CEO of my business, 100%. There's so much that goes into being this solo entrepreneur and performer beyond just the performance aspect.
What are some of the tools you use?
I have my own business cards. I have a professional website that I had built. I believe in continuing your training. So even though I'm kind of big fish in a small pond in Korea, I am branching out globally. So I work with voiceover coaches in America. I had demos professionally produced by producers in America.
But you'd mentioned that samples are enough to begin with, right?
Samples are enough to begin with.
Right.
I use a CRM. So I use a program called Nimble, and it houses not just all of my contacts, but all of my interactions with my contacts. And you can connect your LinkedIn and your Twitter, and it basically tracks all of your relationship management.
And one thing I think it's important for people to understand is when you start at a level where you're depending on agents and you're an agency worker. And you personally, Barry has gotten, as many people do, have gotten to a point where you've entered a freelance market where you're not depending on agents and you're more depending on your own contacts. And that's something that people may or may not evolve to.
Or when I worked for the agencies only, they kept me very busy. If you're good at the job, they can keep you very busy. And I was voicing Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 7 or 8 p.m.
Wow.
Doing educational reading, usually from 10 to 6. And then in the evenings, I'd usually have like a Hungbo or a commercial at night or a video game.
That's really
I was
impressive.
Insanely busy. I would say that that's normal for maybe, I don't know, 5 or 10% of the people.
So some people do work that much.
Yeah. And the people that work that much tend to be North American women, and specifically North American. The North American accent is king here. You can get lots of work.
What North American accent? Like, America has all kinds of accents. So which one?
A neutral American accent and a neutral Canadian.
Like what you have?
Yes. I'm from New York.
You had to lose that in order to be
busted out like every once in a while, but like it's not how I talk. It's not how I talk anymore. What I would say is that if you have a British, Australian, or South African and you want to work more, then I would suggest learn how to nail an American accent.
What are some jobs that you've done in Korea that people might recognize or that are kind of prominent?
I've been fortunate that I've done a few high profile jobs. I'm the voice of KTX, which is the Korea commuter rail in the country. I was the official voice of the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
That was a big one. In terms of animation, I've been a voice on Baby Shark and Ping Fong and Pororo.
Pororo is a really big one in Korea.
Yeah.
Pretty famous.
And I recently completed like 60 episodes of a show called Time Traveler Luke, which is going to be making its way to America soon on TV.
What are some of the disadvantages of working in Korea?
Disadvantages. I would say that it's more challenging to be autonomous with your business. It's more challenging to be in control. And that's
one thing that we discussed in modeling was the lack of regulation. Would you say that carries over into voice too?
Absolutely. Lack of regulation. The fact that there's no dedicated person that's tracking your work. It has to be you. You then have to advocate for yourself to get paid properly for it, and it's hard. It's definitely a disadvantage, a challenge
Yeah,
here.
but besides the lack of regulation, is a pretty good place to
Yeah.
do work. Okay. No, that's
Absolutely.
great.
Seek resources and training, and don't give up. Just keep working on your craft, because there is a place for every voice. Don't just rely on other people or agents. Create your own opportunities as best as you can.
Okay, great. Well, I thank you very much for joining us. I know that this has been a very, again, a popular request, and a lot of people are keen to hear it. So I appreciate you joining us. Thanks, Barry.
My pleasure, Kelly. Thanks for having me.